All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Marketplace Code, your go-to spot for everything Walmart related. By popular demand, we have an amazing guest back in the hot seat. Jake, welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be back again. I have a lot to say and could be a lot of episodes, but
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's going to be plenty of opportunities. It's always a good time. So thank you for coming back. Appreciate you staying late.
Sure.
Awesome. So today, what are we going to be covering? What are we going to be talking about today?
I think on the last episode, we touched a little bit about how Walmart.com and in-store kind of like touch on each other and tie together. I think on this one specifically, there's a lot of companies out there, a lot of like e-commerce companies that I speak with that have currently maybe some 1P business, but don't have in-store placement or don't have any 1P business and are just strictly 3P or have been on Amazon for 10 years. And they always talk about how they're looking to get offline and they're looking to go with their retailers. And although Walmart might be the biggest retailer, a lot of times it makes sense for it to be the first step for a company, especially since you don't always have to launch on a nationwide launch or, something massive. And there's different steps and, to building a Walmart relationship, and doesn't always have to start at something massive, which if you look at the Walmart open call event, we could talk about that as well today, is really what it's based upon, like bringing smaller brands. For that, it's specifically USA made, but it's really, you don't have to be a large national brand to start a relationship with Walmart. You could end up becoming a large national brand, but you don't have to, start off at that. So there's a lot of different, methods I would say to go about it. So we could talk about that.
Yeah, I like that. Like how to grow your brand specifically by driving, or how to drive or grow, develop within your 1P store relationship with Walmart. So we've spoken about this a little bit in the past. Like we've spoken about with Michael. We went through some of this. That was already a few months ago, and obviously things constantly evolve. Company the size of Walmart, obviously the evolution is going to be pretty standard. But I think we'll get a little bit more into today we're going to get a little bit more into the technical components of it, the different launches, what those things mean, what is national, regional, all these different modes. I think a good place to start would be just clarifying what are the different methods that exist today. I think simply we'll clarify just the basics of 3P, 1P, and then let's say store. And then we could get into some of the specific launches. Let's just keep it just like really simple just to start. I'll go through what those are, and then we'll get into some of the specifics, and then we'll talk strategy. Like how do you actually move along throughout this? How do you go ahead and gain more storage placement from doing something through 3P or through 1P.com, whatever the specifics are. So if you understand a little bit more about the internal operations and the business, it'll help give you a little bit more clarity. How do I actually do this? How do I tackle this? What's the way to do it? So let's just start simply with, I think 3 categories is really a simple way to look at it, which is the 3P, 1P, and then the store business. So 3P is, third-party Walmart marketplace. This is where pretty much any brand could come and you could just list your products over there. You set the price. You could do promotions. You have really the most levers. You could fulfill orders yourself through seller fulfillment. You could use Walmart Fulfillment Services, which is WFS. I would say the most similar to Amazon. This is your third-party marketplace. You come in, you do what you want, and at the cost of this is Walmart charges you a commission for your products. Typically about 15%. It does range slightly lower for some of the more specific categories, but that's generally what 3P is for. Then you have the 1P side of the business, which is a number of different factors. We could go into depth over here, but I would say the most common ones that you're going to be facing is 1P. When you hear 1P, typically people are referring to .com only, like Walmart.com, which is specifically you selling inventory to Walmart and they're purchasing it and storing it in their fulfillment centers. So Walmart has fulfillment centers dispersed throughout the US. You're not getting any store placement. It just inventory lives over there. That then gets shipped, as a customer comes to Walmart.com, they see a product and they just get it shipped. There's no pickup and delivery option. So how can you identify this? If you see a listing on Walmart that says sold and shipped by Walmart, and it says, shipping, but no pickup and delivery, that often is indicative that it's 1P.com. It is possible that it's DSV. We're not going to dive too much into DSV, as that's something that's generally being deprecated from Walmart's end, being replaced by the 3P model. And then the other option, which is like what people like really strive for, is the store placement. Is to be able to get their products in store, which is where they can now have, again, we'll talk about like the different levels of being in store. But just say at a ideal place, you have your product across all your stores, and there you have the ability to have store shared inventory where they could use that same inventory in store, which then also gets fulfilled online. You could even have inventory in 1p.com as well as having it in store. So those are kind of like I would say the most general take on it. Do you have anything to add to that specifically?
That's a good way to break it up. I would say that a lot of brands probably listening to this come from the Amazon angle, and there's been a lot of conversations from the Amazon end about should you be 3P, should you be 1P, and the benefits with Amazon of 1P over 3P have significantly reduced these days as Amazon has started like in the beginning when it was harder to get a 1P vendor relationship with Amazon, people obviously really wanted to get it, but now, you'll always see these LinkedIn posts of like what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are. But at the end of the day, I believe on the Amazon side, 1P and 3P inventory are hosted still in the same warehouses. So the shipping speed is still going to be the same between the 3P and 1P item. And yes, Amazon is buying the item from you, but because Amazon also has small and light, or they got rid of small and light, but they have easier ways, I would say, to work off of like smaller items or single packs, I would say, as opposed to Walmart, where it's more difficult to sell the lower priced items on 3P.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to highlight over here is the main difference on the 1P side, or the two main differences, is number one, the shipping speed. It's going to be quicker from 1P owned. Now, it's not going to be as quick as if the item is nationwide in every store, but they do have a certain amount of DCs that will usually hit quicker than WFS fulfillment centers, which could take up to 3 days sometimes.
Right.
That's number one. And number two, and once again, if an item is in store, it could hit you within a half hour to 2 hours. 1P owned, obviously depending on how many DCs they're just how they're distributing it, will usually be faster than WFS. And then the main point is price point wise. They're buying the item from you. They're incurring the shipping. They're paying for it. Right. So you don't have the WFS fee. The WFS fee that still stands right now, which is for any items under $10 that you're paying an extra $1 for. You don't have that as well. So it's just a lot easier to sell.
Right. Yeah, that's actually, I didn't touch on this, but that's really like a core piece of 1P is Walmart is purchasing from you. That is like the key differentiator between the 1P model, the supplier model, if you will, versus the seller model, which is 3P, which is for the seller model, you determine the price, you determine all that, which is what I mentioned. But for the 1P side, all you do is set a cost to Walmart. That's it. You say, hey, this is what you're going to pay me per unit. And then Walmart will then place a purchase order. Even if it's DSV, they're purchasing one at a time. They're purchasing in bulk from you, and that's it. You get that money. If they sell it for twice the price, hooray. If they sell it for less, that's something that you and the buyer would, work on figuring out. But that's the idea, is you don't really have those same levers as you do on the 3P side. And that's really what the 1P model is. It's they're buying, in bulk. They're making purchase orders from you, just, to get more product as at once, So you mentioned a number of interesting things here, which is like the fee structure, right? So you look at profitability, let's say for 3P versus 1P, right? A lot of people, 3P may not necessarily be as profitable for a lot of people, but it's because it has all these levers, it enables you to perhaps scale, maybe quicker than a lot of these 1P items. Versus 1P, you might get a little bit more stuck potentially with some of your abilities to run a promo and like really take advantage of Walmart being always a very cost effective play for a lot of these brands. So I don't know, just each model has its own benefits, and I find the brands we find the brands that are the most successful are the ones that are able to leverage all of them, to really leverage the omnichannel, to be able to sell across 3P and 1P and in store, and really everything feeds and supports each other, because this way you have the benefits of each platform and not just stuck to, the benefits or the detriments of just one of them.
And that answers a few problems. Is I think number one is a lot of brands, when they come to Walmart, and this is specifically with a lot of the e-commerce brands that I speak with, they're just looking at it as, hey, I've heard Walmart is 10% of Amazon, but it's not, because if you're looking at the long-term plan, Walmart could be, obviously Walmart's growing significantly. A lot of categories are hitting 15%. But if you're getting 1P, all of a sudden that number increases,
Could be
significantly.
more.
It could be
Yeah.
more. That's 1P owned. But if you're getting in store, then it could definitely be more. But even if you're 1P owned and not in store, it could hit high volumes. So I think that's one piece. I think another piece that we have to kind of like discuss over here is a lot of brands that I speak with or that I have spoken with have really just been looking at Walmart their Walmart.com plan as how quickly can I get to profitability on the 3P side. And when you look at the e-commerce space, and if you've had any background in Amazon for a few years, you know how difficult it is to get a business there. So just like you would look at an Amazon launch and be like, hey, I'm only planning to make money in year 2 or 3, a Walmart plan should be looked at as the same. But instead of looking at it as just the .com piece, if you have any 1P or in-store goals, which in most cases, if you have a good product to offer that should be somewhere in your picture, then you need to look at the Walmart plan from the beginning like that, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to do marketplace now. If that's not profitable, it's on its own. And then in stores separately on its own. So I really like looking with people at a 2-3 year growth plan of, okay, at what point are we going to graduate 3P? Even if it's 30 items that we have on 3P, if only 1 or 2 of those items get in store, all of a sudden that changes our P&L and everything that we've invested from year 1 and 2. So
Yeah.
how to look at that process and when to graduate in different stages.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely, I would say, why so many brands we've worked with who, they maybe failed or they haven't necessarily seen the success that they've wanted to with Walmart is because they're trying to just replicate their Amazon business, but it's a different model. It has an angle to this that's very different from Amazon. If you treat Walmart the same way you treat your Amazon, generally that's where you're not going to see that success. You have to treat it for the platform it is today. It's not just another third-party, e-com platform. It is an omnichannel platform. That is their distinction. That is, even what I would say is their ability to win in the space. That's something that they have. Their edge over Amazon is they have a massive store business that drives so much volume and so much recognition that if you're able to really build up your e-com place and you're able to win your store placement or win even your 1P placement, like that is something that you could win over Amazon. Let's say even, you do well with Amazon, you get to that vendor relationship with them. Yeah, it's definitely like it's something worthwhile, and you could definitely get to a good spot, and you can make a very profitable business. But just think of like the largest suppliers on Walmart versus the largest suppliers on Amazon, and I would say there's a clear distinction over there, right? These Walmart powerhouses, right? Just having that, again, their store business is essentially as much as Walmart's e-com business. That's crazy to think about, and to think that they're just continuously going to be growing their e-com business, like.
Amazon's e-com business.
Yes, I'm saying, saying Walmart's store business is comparable to Amazon's e-com business when you look at revenue, and that's insane,
Yeah, I think for a lot of brand, like I was speaking to a brand today, they're in very general categories, storage, organization, like just these categories that you would think are very hard to penetrate, and you would think that the shelf space is just locked down and there's no way to get in. But they're having conversations with the Walmart buyers, and the buyers are telling them, hey, the brands that we have in the space are quote unquote dinosaurs. If you come in with strong digital numbers, we're going to be able to, we can give you some of that shelf space. And I know that's true because there's a brand that came to us a year and a half ago that's storage organization, very general items, nothing unique about the items. He told me at that time, and this was a year and a half ago when the whole digital game was still quite new for Walmart. And he was telling me that he's just launching with us because he wants to get into Walmart stores. At that time, we knew a little bit about the in-store side, but I just told him, I'm like, hey, let's do it. Like, we'll launch you. Little do you know, a few months ago, he's launching with 15 SKUs nationwide at Walmart in one of the hardest categories. So, I mean, this just kind of proves it's like no matter what category you're in, obviously, you got to have a good brand. And if you have a patent or something really cool, yes, there's different ways to fast track. And if the Walmart buyer really loves your product, like there'll be ways to get in. But no matter what, you're going to have to show that .com performance. And even if you think that your shelf space is locked down, like Walmart's always looking to bring that next product in store and see how it performs, especially if you're able to have that digital game and back it up. So this guy that spoke to you today was literally just adamant on like, every time we bring a product to them, he's in multiple different categories. Every time they're just .com, .com, .com. And it's something I hear every day pretty much.
That's really your advantage as an Amazon or just a general e-commerce seller is digital well. And because Walmart, again, right, spoken about this so many times, is that's where the area that they're trying to dominate in. If they have a store business that's, doing really well, but they're not embracing the .com, they need to make decisions and start to work on bringing in brands who are able to have more of that influence, who are able to have those strong digital penetration numbers and really set the category, because those are numbers that matter to them in order to be able to succeed in, today's space. In order to succeed in today's space, you need to have that strong digital performance. So that's why they're leaning more on that. So that's where you as a brand now have the ability to, to lean in and actually win some of the shelf space. So let's talk a little bit about like, the journey. So to say, like, your brand, you've been selling on Amazon, like what is the opportunity that exists for these sellers? Do you just, strike up a conversation with the merchant? You go to Bentonville, you just go flag someone down and start speaking to them? Do you start with 3P? What does the progression look like? You mentioned nationwide. Let's talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it's first is like looking and developing just your Walmart strategy. Going in store, checking out what your shelf space looks like. Literally just do a walk in Walmart stores, see who the competitors are, what they're currently doing, just a little bit about their brands. Even look at the companies on LinkedIn. Are they medium-sized companies? Are they national brands? And you'll find that some don't seem as scary as you would think. They're brands that launched at trade shows, had some good products, got in touch with the Walmart buyer, and they got in the store. And obviously, it's not that easy of a process. And back in the day, it was easier to skip the .com game. But once again, if you're looking at it from the Amazon, if you're an Amazon brand and you're looking at it from that angle, you already come in with a significant advantage that these other brands don't, where they're not Amazon first companies. So you're already ahead on the digital game. Now, obviously, you got to have the right brand and the right product. So really just depends like what your shelf space looks like, getting an idea of that. Based off of that, if you feel like you have the price point, obviously, which is going to be the main thing to come in with Walmart, and you're going to be able to, pitch that to them. Number one is if you have a good brand, you don't necessarily have the right price point, there's always an exclusive SKU that you can make for Walmart. For a smaller retailer, maybe that's not worth it, but for the biggest retailer in the world, that is worth it. And you don't have to necessarily even build that SKU when you're launching your marketplace, because you really just need to build your brand with Walmart and a little bit around the category. And it doesn't have to be that you built that specific SKU for the past year to bring it up to the Walmart buyer. That's, you just really need to build a brand on Walmart.
You need to make the noise.
Yeah. So you can always have a plan of like, okay, if we get in, as we get in touch with the Walmart buyers, which that's not the hard part. Like a lot of people could get in front of Walmart buyers. They're reachable. It used to be back in the day that they were reachable to everybody. Now these days, obviously it's a little, they can't respond to everybody, but all I've seen is that with good brands, like even if they don't have a personal relationship with them, if they reach out to the buyer directly and they have a good product, like they'll get a response. So it's really identifying like, okay, like, am I going to have some sort of game plan for Walmart? If I am, let me get my .com, the digital game started first. Timeline wise, I would say 6 to 8 months would be probably the minimum of building, like enough to build strong presence within a category, obviously dependent on the category and how competitive it is. There's some categories that are more niche, some that are more general. At that point, that's when you should be starting aggressive outreach, I would say, to the Walmart buyer saying, hey, have you seen our brand before? We're actually the top sellers, one of the top 3P sellers in the category. And, basically kind of, showing your story through there instead of, I would say the most annoying way to do the sales pitch is to email them every day. Hey, look at my brand without actually having to do the work. The softest way to kind of pitch the buyer is as they're typing in the main keywords in their category, which they always are because they're responsible for their category. You're just showing up in their face. So 3 months into it, during your soft launch, they're already starting to see your brand. They're getting familiar with it. And you're just continuously marketing to them, as you're scaling more and more on .com. So I think 6 to 8 months would be when you should really start outreach directly to the buyer. But until then, it's not like you're not doing outreach. You're building your brand. You're getting in front of the buyer, and they're noticing you.
They'll notice you. Yeah, you don't have to send that email just for them to know who you are, right? With the changes that happened within the Walmart org over the past few years, part of that was that, digital, or rather merchants, are now responsible for the digital side of their department as well. So when they have a department that they're overseeing, say fitness, it's not just about the in-store fitness. They also oversee and they are responsible for the GMV that comes from, fitness from e-commerce as well. Even 3P brands, that is something that matters to them. So if they have, a specific high volume keyword that they're searching for, and they see, who's this brand? I don't know this guy. Like, and they're always there. They're always there when you're searching for it. So it's interesting, maybe your ROAS doesn't look so good today, but think of it from the ROAS that you're getting from eventually winning that store business. It could be really significant, that one ad that you paid for, who knows when. So I find there's a lot of really cool data to support this. There's obviously, the hard numbers is the sales, right? Just getting those dollars up there. Right? You have to make sure that you're actually driving sales, even if you're not driving necessarily the most profitable sales. I know there's something that you don't want to go too aggressively where you're like really losing money on everything and you're completely overspending, because they want to make sure that you actually have like a business that you could bring in and support. I've heard some things around this, but you still, like, if you're going aggressively and you're pushing and you're willing to take a maybe not the best return, and really you're not thinking of it from the Amazon profitable angle, you're thinking, hey, a larger, broader scale over here, then you're able to see like, all right, I need to hit a certain dollar amount and that's going to make enough of an impact. That's a great choice. Now, how do you know what that dollar amount is? Obviously, every category is gonna change. I would say one of the best places to look is within search insights, within Seller Center. It's right over there. It tells you, hey, within your product type, within your category, what's your sales rank? What's your impression rank, your click rank, your at the cart rank? I love this data. It's like some of my favorite data in Walmart. But like, you could use that and actually say, hey, like essentially, it's mimicking the BSR from Amazon. Am I winning? I started off as 200. I'm right now number 5. I'm the 5th largest or top selling product within this category. Awesome. You're now on someone's radar. You're something that someone cares about now. So it's very important to like see the dollar values, obviously, but also being able to take a look at what these metrics are, because that again is something that you could then present to the buyer. So you come and tell that story now. Hey, when I first started, I was at X. Now I'm at Y. Let's push to have this conversation. And they should again already be aware of you. So just a very important lens to really consider within this, this Walmart plan. Something that may not always work out for you though is, there are, mod resets, which is, throughout the year, there's different periods that a category will be changed for what they're bringing into stores. And something just to consider is like, your timing of your 6 to 8 months may not align with that timing of the mod reset, which, could definitely be the buyer just made a decision and they're taking another brand in store. And now you just came knocking on their door literally 2 days later. Definitely the timing of things is always going to be an impact, but that's why consistency is so important. Even if, let's say, you worked on it for 6 to 8 months, keep on pushing. There's going to be that opportunity. If you worked on it for, let's say, 2 years and you're still getting nothing, maybe at that point, maybe it's something to consider looking into fundamentally where there might be some issues. But at least if you're working on it consistently for a year from the point that you already are at that point where you feel like you have a marketable product to a merchant, then you have like at least I would say like a good year that you could really be putting in the effort, continuously reaching out, using your data, staying top of search for your keywords. That's just a great way to just get that visibility. So
good note about the mod resets and just when line reviews are. You could dig and get that information. You could just reach out to Cellcord. We'd be happy to get you what those dates are. Just per category. Once again, some categories have a few times throughout the year. Some categories are less, just depending how often Walmart resets the mod. But yeah, that's a good point to kind of keep an eye out for that.
Right, but you still have the .com, right? You still have the 1p.com.
Of course. And so the 1p.com, that could come in at any point. And I think, once again, that's the next phase, right? So we're building 3P. We're getting it to a good position. There's some categories, I think this is important to explain. There's some categories that in most categories, the 1p.com is bought from the same buyer that's buying in store. There are some categories, generally in larger categories, where the 1p.com business is that big that they'll have a separate buyer for just 1p.com. That buyer is not buying for in-store, and then you have a separate buyer for in-store actually. And they'll obviously work together, but in most categories, you'll have the buyer is also just the buyer that's buying in store is buying for 1p.com. And that's really your entry to really prove to them, because they're watching what you're doing on 3P and they're seeing your brand, and that's how you're getting in the door. But once you're in the door and you get a 1p.com order, they'll say, hey, we're ordering 2,500 units right now for 1p.com. We'll test it over the month, see how it goes. That's your real test. Like right now, you went from, like just the first date to like, you're going on your fifth, sixth date with them. And this is where you really want to prove right now that you could really, really drive traffic. So that's, I would say, key right now is that you need to show them, hey, yes, we've done awesome digitally on 3P. We could blow out the 1P order. And a lot of times brands will have a misconception. They're like, oh, now I'm getting 1P, so they're going to pin me to the top. I'm going to be ranked well either way, because you are going to get very good ranking because it's faster shipping speeds, as we spoke about, lower price point. So it's going to sell well either way, but you want to blow it out of the water. So with good content optimization, good ads, that's where you take it to the next level and really lock down.
Go out of stock. On 3P, you should never run out of stock. On 1P,
exactly,
go out of stock.
And I think that also will determine, depending on how, like, let's say, the buyer originally had in mind, because if you're a new supplier, they're not going to necessarily want to launch you nationwide. In very, very few cases, they will, because they're nervous if you're going to be able to really handle it. Inventory wise, it's a lot of risk for them. If they end up launching you in store and you run out of stock, it's one of the worst nightmares for them. So the Walmart buyers are very careful taking on new suppliers, and you have to bring enough to the table that they're willing to take on that risk. Because no matter how much you tell them you're on top of your process, if you're a smaller brand, smaller supplier, they're always nervous of that. So I think really doing a good job on the 1P could help the buyer say, you know what, originally I was planning to launch them in 250 doors. I'm going to give them a 500 store test, which will help you move a lot quicker, because you've been able to really prove yourself through 1p.com. And they know that even if you don't hit the sell-throughs right away on, through in store, you'll be able to push that rest of that volume on .com.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's so many metrics that, these merchants are looking at, but like for the stock piece, I'm saying, I want to clarify, obviously, like, as a supplier, you don't want to run out of your product. Obviously, that's super important, and running out of that is, chaos, and you could really burn your bridges with Walmart like that. You flop on a launch like that. I'm saying, like, if you are getting a certain amount of units purchased from Walmart, we had I know a brand in the diaper category that they kept just burning through all their units because their ads were running really efficient, like really well. They were driving a lot of sales. And just like they kept going back to the merchant, hey, I need to purchase more and more and more. And just it builds that, the relationship. And maybe it's not the best user experience. It's not ideal, but use that to your advantage. Say like, hey, I need you to buy more of this because we keep going out of stock. Like, please be on top of it. Obviously, from a production perspective, never go out of stock. You need to make sure that you can make your orders. And if that's an issue for you, don't overdo it. And really, like, I think kind of the ramp up is what's so useful. Like if you go to 1p.com first, and then you start in a smaller launch and you're able to really like try and make your launch really tried and true, where you're like, hey, I know I could actually make this. I know I can make X amount of units, instead of just going national off the cuff. And suddenly, you don't even have the ability to produce at such a scale. And then you just, you're in a pickle. So sometimes it's kind of good, like this ramp up. So it's important that obviously production is so important. All these metrics, things you don't even know about. You're an Amazon seller. You know what OTIF is. Like, you're not thinking about these things. You don't know all these different metrics that actually matter to your merchants. That's why, it's always important to work with your local favorite Walmart marketplace or .com agency. But that's just something to know. Is you have to know, like, what are these metrics that actually matter that you need to be on top of, and are you ready to take on such responsibility? Are you ready to really go national? Are you ready to take on that, not a risk, so to say, but ability within your company to perform at that level?
Yeah, I think the Amazon like replenishment process and running out of stock, I think, is a nightmare for a lot of Amazon sellers, and has really trained them on how important it is. Take those same learnings over to Walmart. It's obviously a completely different replenishment process, but it's a lot harder. I would say, I would dare to say it's even harder than the Amazon process, even though with Amazon, a lot of times you're making shipments weekly and they have inventory limits and all that. I mean, with Walmart, your game has to be so strong, and there just can't be any like holes in just the replenishment process with Walmart. So like you said, that 1P process is really kind of the training to learn how you ship a Walmart PO, how Walmart receives it, where you're sending it to, all the different DCs that they have, and kind of, consolidators and all that, that whole field, like, is going to be new, especially for a lot of sellers that have just been sending into Amazon FBA and have never dealt with retailers and one as big as Walmart,
For sure.
Yeah. So I think it's, once again, like building the 3P with a game plan of when you come into it, when will you eventually hit the buyers, understanding when those line reviews are, which once again, definitely reach out to us about. Once you build that, there'll be certain opportunities to get items into 1P owned. In specific cases, if you have an amazing brand or you have a patented item or something just that really stands out, you will be able to skip the middle piece, which is the 1P, and the buyer will just be like, hey, let's launch you in stores. And then that's really up to you if, you're ready for that. But that's one scenario. Also, we didn't discuss, but there's something called the Walmart Open Call event, which is one time a year. I think it's actually coming up. Applications are actually open right now. And it's really for made in the USA brands, and also like minority brands, minority owned brands. So it's a good opportunity for smaller brands to kind of get in the door with Walmart. And there's something called the whole golden ticket process, where a lot of the brands that go down there could win something called a golden ticket, which means on the spot, the Walmart buyer gives you a commitment, which is pretty cool. So every year there's some brands that get in through the Walmart Open Call event. One of those brands, I believe, is actually Dude Wipes, because they keep having a booth over there. And I think it's because they were originally brought in, if I'm not mistaken, through Open Call. There's a few other brands also that have little booths at every Open Call event. So that's a cool event. But regardless, once again, all depends on your category, how competitive it is, but come with a game plan of when, you're going to want to graduate from 3P to 1P, which SKUs those will be. If you're going to make exclusive SKUs, packaging takes a long time. Already get ahead of that. Already have some mock-ups so that if the buyer reaches out to you and they'll be like, hey, I love your brand, instead of drafting up within a day or two some mock-ups, already have that all prepared so you can get ahead of the retail game, because there's a lot of these pieces that are kind of needed. So while you're building through your 3P launch, get those pieces kind of set. And then obviously the in-store side, it could happen at any level. It could be regional launch, it could be nationwide launch. So kind of be ready for it. But then there's always going to be that digital game. You launch in 250 doors, you're going to need to show really strong numbers to get into 500, to get into 1,000, and to continue building from there. So there's always that game, with Walmart.
Awesome. Really, really good nuggets over here. I mean, we've talked about this forever. There's so much levels of granularity to get into when it comes to stores. Obviously, the specifics, what the heck is an end cap? What are these things even mean? There's so much more to dive into over here. And I love to pick this up again. But I think anything else before we wrap up for today?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Once again, think of your Walmart strategy on a holistic level. Don't just look at it as oh, Walmart's 10% of Amazon. Is it worth me? Is it worth me? Is it worth my time right now? They're the fastest growing marketplace. Very soon, it'll be at a much larger number than that 10, 15% mark that's thrown around. Even that number is literally getting higher by the day. But look at it on a holistic level on a 2-3 year game plan. Already get ahead of it, because the brands that did this in 2013, 2015 on Amazon are sitting there with 100,000 reviews. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of who really takes initiative first.
Awesome. Jake, thank you again for coming on. This was great.
Awesome. We'll reconnect for sure. We'll do it again.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to the Marketplace Code. It's been a pleasure. Tune in next time to get some more great wisdom on Walmart.com.